We're back, baby. It is the charity stripe. Hit your free throws because they are free. Fisher to Sopolis live on the Believe YouTube. We have the second biggest merger of the spring, dude. PGA, LIV, joining forces. Kind of wild. I mean, the first obviously being GoJo and Waystar, being Royco being the biggest merger. As we saw in the finale of Succession, if you haven't seen it yet, spoiler alert, sorry, get out from under the rock, Patrick Starr. It's so crazy to me because honestly, I know that LIV has been around for a lot longer than we've realized, but I still feel as if that we didn't even have time to kind of conceptualize or experience it or really see what it was. I think the merger had to happen. I don't know if it's a victory per se for the PGA, more so as like a right move of coming to their senses. It's I think I see a lot of tweets out there, and one of the ones I'm resonating most is with guys like Rory, who, was really great the past couple of, years, seasons. And frankly, all his buddies went to go to LIV, make 9 figures, some of them crazy money, while they just prepared for the major tournaments. And he really put the PGA on his back. I mean, those are the tweets that I'm seeing that I'm resonating most with. I've seen a couple of them, some Office references about when Michael Scott took BJ Novak's character and took Pam, and they all left to start their own company, took all the clients, and then sold the company and then came back to Scranton. I thought that was funny. A couple Tom Wamsgans memes of him being the new commissioner of the PGA LIV, which we don't know what it's called yet, merger. But definitely very Max Homa tweeted out, we changed the names. A lot of funny tweets we're seeing, but definitely very surprising, very peculiar. It's a little bizarre that we even got to this point in the first place.
Yeah, I want to. I'm a little bit confused about what you said though, with that this has been going on for a long time. It's been not even a year since the first LIV event.
I feel like it's been, but the idea of LIV has been going on I didn't say long time. I said longer than we thought. It feel like longer than it felt like. To me, it felt like very quick.
I mean,
we didn't even have time to really, see what cannibalize what this was. But the idea of LIV has been around for, I think, a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I just the stance that the PGA took, and then now kind of flipping with this 180, and without the consultation of the guys that make up the sport, the actual players themselves. Justin Thomas just tweeted like a photo of his phone just blowing up because he has so many different messages. He said was having quite the nice practice session this morning too. I can imagine that a lot of guys were out there either on a front nine or just at the range working on their game, and this came out of left field.
They were filming Full Swing. They were filming an episode of Full Swing when this broke. Greg Norman, sorry to cut you off, but Greg Norman, who's the CEO of LIV, wasn't even involved in the merger talks. He found out like the rest of us.
Yeah, I just, it's interesting. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people like there's overreactions, of course. There's reactions just to what's going on. And then there's speculation as to what this means, especially from a financial implication standpoint, to the guys that didn't join initially, right? Who didn't get that lump sum paycheck and now are not going to get the same offering that the initial wave of guys that joined LIV got. But the idea is that in the long run, because of how flush with cash the public investment fund is, that they will end up better off for it. I have no idea if that's true. That's just speculation out there. Like, it just is a really divisive thing.
Are you questioning how much money really is out there in that case? Like, are you pondering that most of the money, the big money, has been spent already?
No, because it's all fake money. I mean, money is like what we created. We created money. Like we have the printing presses that create bills, no matter what the currency is. And no, I don't think that the public investment fund has any shortage. I think that they are going to be able to pay out until the cows come home. This is not something that I don't think they're running out of money. I think that maybe LIV with the initial investment was having a tough time generating revenue. And so that's why the merger, at least there's an indication to me that like they need the eyeballs that the PGA gets, and they need everything to come together, and they need all of the golfers competing together like they used to drive as many eyeballs to the sport so that they can make the most in ad rev. It's wild that like there's these personal feelings from a lot of different golfers who didn't join coming out to fruition. Like Colin Morikawa didn't know what was going. Like none of these golfers knew what was going on. I think that's the bottom line is that you look at other leagues, like the NBA just put together a new CBA, the players union, the Players Association was heavily involved in the conversation. They were the driving factor as to why a new CBA was reached.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, ultimately, it's the owners that have to say yes to all of that. But it's kind of a complete opposite outlook on the sport and how the players are treated in comparison to the ownership.
It's similar to UFC where there's one governing body, and there's like a governing body of the PGA.
Except there's not. There's two. They've
merged. Yes. So like overarching, yes. A couple of things on that. There's the PGA players not involved. For the current PGA players, I think it's only a benefit. It's just unfortunate, like we're saying, that I think some of the money that we've seen go through in the past season, year and a half, is going to be muted. Like they're not going to get as much money as the initial guys got, but they still will benefit monetarily in the long run. I don't, obviously there's going to be no form of restitution for them. It's really not needed, but again, like I mentioned, guys like Rory, guys who really stuck with the PGA, it's just going to be like, damn, I would have gone to LIV in that case, took some cash up front, and we'd still all be here all together. But I think
it just makes them look foolish. It's like, why were we saying no in the first place? I mean,
yeah,
outside of the fact that you can really dig into this, just the constitution of why these guys are making the decision to stay with the PGA in the first place, because of where this money comes from that is funding the LIV Tour.
Well, the are you talking about politically? Because that's a whole nother ballgame that people. That's obviously
a main driving factor behind a lot of the players sticking with the PGA, and of course the historical precedent of the PGA itself and the tour.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously golf and the game has become. I mean, it always has been a massive global sport, but I feel as if even more so now, like it's grown globally, not just in America, as the days have gone on. And it's one of the faster rising sports. I think we see, obviously, because anybody can play it. It's like a very big leisure activity. It's not like, football. We can't, like, a group of us can't just go and throw on pads, right? I mean, it's very cumbersome, but to go hit the links, to go hit a couple par threes, like golf is a very tangible sport for a lot of people, and it's very accessible. And I think obviously, like, that's helped in the astronomical growth we've seen, not just nationally, but globally. But definitely where the money comes from, past Saudi deals, politically, it's definitely been a major issue for the players. So their lack of involvement there, I think, is definitely quite peculiar. It just kind of feels like a very rushed decision. I'm not saying it in a bad way or a good way. It just seems very rushed. And it seems like players, like you're saying, who were anti-LIV, not for monetary reasons, but for political reasons. You can't get everybody's opinion, but it's unfortunate their opinions weren't heard from a player's perspective. I do think it's very interesting, though, from both parties. Like, obviously, LIV has the funding and has like this new, fresh idea, but it couldn't really compete, it seems, with the traditions of the PGA. There was nothing that LIV was going to put on, especially if LIV players were allowed to compete. Like Koepka won the PGA championship. A lot of the guys, I mean, where we, one of the things that we love to do every year is our Masters pool. And a lot of the guys, who came in, they took heavy notice because a lot of the LIV guys came into the Masters and were like, Patty Reed was really good. Koepka was really strong. A lot of the LIV guys were really good in the Masters. So I think that LIV kind of saw the writing on the wall, being like, look, we could throw as much money as these guys as we want. It could take a really long time and it could be very cumbersome to compete with the eyeballs of the PGA. And I think the PGA was like, look, we can't pay these guys what LIV is. It's impossible. Like, and eventually we'll lose more and more guys. The paychecks get fatter and fatter, and less guys will compete on the everyday tours. And everyone will just, all right, we'll show up. It'll be like the Undertaker. All right, I'll show up at WrestleMania. Like, all right, we'll all just show up at the Masters, but we won't. And we'll show up at the PGA, the US Open, but we won't show up to like the bigger or like the smaller mid-tier events.
Yeah, I get it's just like the way that every other league has functioned is in direct opposition from a business standpoint of how LIV sought out to begin their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like if you and I create a league, a new basketball league.
Yeah.
I guess like we would have to just pay the athletes like some amount to pull them from the NBA, but like how would we even guarantee that our league is going to make money without having already established distribution rights and
that's what I'm saying.
Viewing platforms? Like they don't have any of that. Also, not to mention like this is less kind of like business related and more so just critiquing. Like they have the teams, right? These teams' names are just terrible.
Oh yeah, that's what Max Homa was tweeting about. Like these,
he was like, "What's a clique?" And I looked up, I like pulled up an article of the different teams. I mean, this is to your point of like, this happened really, really fast. Okay, it's been in the works for a long time, the LIV portion of it, like you were saying, but this league has not even been around for a full year. Like we're now coming up on 365 days of when they played their first tournament. And I didn't even know what all the different teams were. And that's because I kind of, was like, okay, there's this clear rift, and I know the PGA, I know those players, I know those tournaments. Like that's where I'm going to focus my efforts as a sports fan in general, who likes to watch basketball, NFL, MLB, a lot of different sports. Like for the golf side of things, I want the majors and I want the other big tournaments, and I want to know who's, the top 10 in the world golf ranking, which you were mentioning Rory before. He's number 3, and he's been basically a top 5 guy, any given week for the last 3.5 years.
Kind of honestly, dude, almost for a large portion of our lifetime.
Yes. But even specifically in the last 5 years, he's been playing top-notch golf, which is an even bigger question as to like why he hasn't been able to kind of like get over the hump and win a major recently. But I'm looking at these teams, man, and they're like the aces,
Team Torque,
the cliques, the crushers, the fireballs, the high flyers, the ironheads.
Yeah, they're all.
This is like backyard baseball. Like create a team right now. Like
literally the watermelon heads. Like I'm Team Torque, by the way. Joaquin Neiman, Team Torque. They're all, and if you look at the teams, they're all like countrymen, and it's like the guys from Mexico and the guys from Spain are the fireballs. The guys from, and then it's like split up like that, which is so interesting. I'm curious to see if, they add to the teams. I don't hate the teams though. The team names are weak for sure, but I don't hate teams in the sense I think that could add a new element to golf. And we've seen it work with like when Mahomes and Josh Allen, and like Mahomes and Steph Curry versus Josh Allen and whatever NBA player they throw in there. Like we've seen that work before. So I think that if the team golf, I think adding that element to things, if done right, and I think adding PGA's ability or we'll see what they do. because again, like, the benefit of being the PGA, you have all these awesome traditions. You really don't have to reinvent the wheel here a lot of the times. So this is going to call on their creative team a little bit to kind of create some events where it's going to be more team centric. But I think that with PGA's eyeballs and their distribution, I think some of these team events can be very fun. So implementing the teams, if they change the team names, even the teams out, I think can be very beneficial to me. But I'm excited. I'm excited that there isn't this live, stigma, I should say, hanging over the heads of the PGA, hanging over the heads of the major tournaments. We'll hear about the merger. We'll keep a close eye on things and watch as things go down. But I'm glad overall that it's not going to be a negative topic of conversation every time we go to watch a major tournament.
Are you sure about that?
I think it'll dissipate. I think it'll dissipate.
I think you're looking at a Manfred level commissioner hate going forward, no matter what this guy does.
Yeah, they've already disliked him for so long, though. I think Monahan has already been. The
guys that went to LIV disliked him, but the guys there were some of the biggest.
I'm saying a lot of the public disliked him.
Yeah, well, there's no coming back for him now.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had an option to figure things out when they initially started LIV, couldn't do it. Took him, 2 years since LIV's real inception, a year of a full season from LIV where the players kind of pitter-pattered around and then came back and dominated, some major tournaments. For him to be like, all right, we got to figure this thing out because they'll not only sink themselves, but sink us in the process, honestly.
I don't know. I don't necessarily know about that. If they were, a lot of this is I need more information now, right? Like we're saying, I don't know how these.
Well, we don't even know what it's going to be called,
right? Or are the two leagues going to continue to exist, but they just will be under one big umbrella, but functionally in the way that the game is played with the match play versus, the majors? Will that look the exact same as it has? Probably not. There will probably be some sort of change to that, but we just don't know. And that's the really interesting thing about this is without more information, all hell is breaking loose now. It's just,
yeah, it just seems like it kind of reminds me of when Blake Griffin found out he was traded to the Pistons on Twitter.
Yeah.
But everybody was traded.
Right.
Not just Blake Griffin. Everyone in the league was moving teams.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, how much did that trade change the fabric of the NBA? Not much.
All right, I'm doing a deep dive on that while we continue to talk because I think I can make the argument that maybe it did.
Did it?
I gotta look at the package while we pitter patter back and forth. But I think that it's going to positively affect the game and the narrative that surrounds a lot of the tournaments. That's my biggest takeaway. I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know how they're going to merge the style of LIV with the PGA tournaments. I don't know if they're going to add new stuff. Like I'm saying with the team branded tournaments, but I think positively the narrative that we see on a week-to-week basis of golf, I think the merging of it gets rid of the notion that players can leave for either brand back and forth. I think that helps.
I don't think that was really, I don't think that was happening as much in the last 3 to 5 months though.
I'm not saying it was, but it was always on the table. It's just like a thought. It is an absolute, if there was another NBA that formed, right? Or another let's say the USFL is there. We have a bunch of, XFL. What if that started to take off and one day, not Pat Mahomes, not Jalen Hurts, but let's say Russell Wilson kind of, balked again with the Broncos. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the XFL. What if so slowly but surely that became a place where players could leave to?
But we just know that will never happen though.
I know we know that'll never happen, but play with me here.
But it wasn't Russell Wilson. It was Brooks Koepka and it was Dustin Johnson. Both guys who had been #1 world golf rank within the last 5 years of them making the decision to join.
Okay, so but Russell Wilson, like, get rid of this past year, and there was times where Koepka wasn't on the top of his game before he went to LIV. Russell Wilson, before this past year, was considered a top 7 quarterback in the league. The Broncos were considered a sleeper Super Bowl team before the season.
I'll give you 3 years ago, Russell Wilson. I will not give you the last 2 because he has been not.
Don't say bad. Don't say bad. Don't say bad.
I didn't say bad. You know that
because he went for
2 years ago. You're going to tell me that Russell Wilson had a good season.
I'm pulling his numbers up because I want to come.
The fact that you don't know that off the top of your head tells me exactly what I need to know. Come on. You know Russell Wilson. You know him.
He had 25 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. The year before that, he had 40 touchdowns to 13 interceptions.
That's not. I said 2 years ago. I didn't say 3.
He was a Pro Bowler.
3 years ago, he was great. But he also is dealing with injuries. So are those guys. But I just don't think it's necessarily the same comparison because he was without a doubt not a top 5 QB in the NFL at that time.
Okay, so, fine. Let's say Aaron Rodgers who just went back to back, except, Sands this year, MVPs. If you instead of going to the Jets, he's like, I'm going to the XFL. Is that better?
That's the better comp.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's now we don't, even if that wasn't happening on a consistent basis, if it happened, it only takes one time for something to happen, and then it's a thing. Even if it never really anything is possible. Like, how often do we see players, just kind of throwing examples out there? I'm sure we've seen it since, but I can't think of the time off the top of my head where a player runs into the stands and goes after a heckling fan, a la Malice in the Palace. But it's possible because it happened once.
Okay.
So, point being, I'm not saying guys are leaving and going back and forth from LIV to PGA all the time, but since it's happened once, it could happen anytime. So now we don't have that hanging over our heads. If guys aren't like, the PGA kind of like makeshift. We don't have like Scotty or Rory being like, you know what? I'm going to go to LIV. We don't have that anymore. We don't have guys coming back to the PGA. We don't have to deal with that. I think that's a positive to me for the sports merging.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. I can see that. To me, ultimately, revenue is generated by these leagues and by these sports by viewership. So my original thought process behind why LIV wasn't working, as far as bringing more people in to watch and consume that version of golf, in comparison to the majors and the PGA and the PGA Tour, I'm like, nothing changes. That like they didn't have to make the move, is what I'm saying. I get why you're saying that they did make the move, because you're preventing individual golfers from getting poached, basically. But I felt like that had kind of simmered off, and that was not the conversation. And the conversation was, are these guys going to play well in these tournaments? And
Which they did.
How many have we played in, though? But there's been 2 majors.
They played well in both.
Okay,
there's 4, but like, and I also think there's a bigger issue on a week to week basis on the mid to smaller tournaments where you're losing a lot of participation from top tier golfers.
Well, I think you're losing that either way.
It's more so now, I would say.
I honestly think that LIV has less of an impact on that than you would think.
Okay. I also think, though, that it's the
same principle. No. Look, it's the same principle as guys sitting in the regular season in the NBA so that they're ready to go for the playoffs.
I'm not saying these guys play.
What ultimately gets you paid more, what ultimately gives you the biggest kind of career legacy stamp. It's winning majors. That's it.
Sure. But like I'm saying, like I do think, though, like less and less we've seen, I know you'd have to look at it, but I feel as if less and less we've seen some of the top tier guys participate in some of the mid tier to smaller tournaments. I also think that you said one of your points was eyeballs drive, money, viewers, and sports, right? And
It's
that
literally the only league that doesn't operate like that is with LIV, because they have endless cash flow.
Which I think goes back to one of your other points being you need to see more. We're also dealing into the overarching thing. And, you know, if I may Dark Knight this thing, kind of like they were, you know, I think we've put our trust in a man we fully don't understand. What we know sports as, money is created, league revenue is created, ownership dollars are created to pay the players in team sports, right? By viewers. Eyeballs equals dollars. This doesn't operate like that. This is just pay to play. These guys have like printing money, like we're saying. You want to come play golf? Okay, here's, you know, 15 mil. They're just throwing money out. It's like the Yankees on steroids with no luxury tax. And instead of having billions to play with, they have tens of billions to play with. They'll just throw money any which way they want. I don't even think we fully comprehend still. And going back to maybe the point you brought up at the beginning of like, this hasn't been going on. And a point I also made too, when I said I thought it feels shorter or feels longer than it's been going on. Like we've only had the concept of LIV for 2 years, a full season of LIV in one. I don't even think we've even had time to fully wrap our heads around what LIV is, where this money, you know, comes from, how much is in this. Is it, you know, infinity? The limit does not exist. Little Mean Girls for you. Not Mean Girls. What is that?
No, that's Mean Girls. The limit does not exist. That's Mean Girls.
Okay.
Caddy Heron and the Mathletes. Yeah.
Okay. What was I Confessions of a Teenage Drama? I don't know why I mixed those two movies up. Sorry, Lindsay. Shout out Merrick.
You're talking about two just different tiers of movies there. One of those is Mean Girls is an all-time comedy.
Yes. The money, Cam Rogers weighing in. The money was endless. LIV tournament wasn't going away.
Get in on the mic, Cam.
Cam, come on the mic. It's you know how to get on the back end of StreamYard. You could hop on. Jay knew that, and he figured he'd cash out while he had the choice. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You know, he felt pressed against the gun a little bit. Like it was either cash out now or it gets worse and worse as the days goes on and the narrative gets worse and worse and the negativity around the sport gets worse and worse. I don't, you know, I think we're all kind of, you know, in the same boat that he had to make a decision. He had to make a decision now. The money being endless is kind of a wild concept to me.
It is wild. And you're talking about pay to play. The first thing that comes into my mind is like me going to a Nickel-Rama and putting in tokens to play whatever game I wanted. But the thing about that is like the amount I have and the amount that it costs to play the game at Nickel-Rama, it's a nickel for every game.
Yeah.
And I can play that racing game, you know, for 4 hours, because if I came in with $10, whatever, the margins there are enough where the pay to play makes sense logically in my head. But at a certain point, it matters how much money Nickel-Rama is getting, or else that business will not be operational. If they're not getting it, and then they have to jack up their prices to to quarter Rama, right? For a quarter every single time you put it in the machine, or you're using tokens and the tokens are worth 50 cents. It just is, like Cam points out, like the money being endless, and you saying that's hard to conceptualize. It is hard for me to conceptualize, but mostly from the sense of, how are you making money? If you're paying these guys a certain amount, like at a certain point, profitability and revenue generated it's still important, is like my largest point, I guess. And I just, and Cam Rogers right here, I want to bring him in. Talk to us, Cameo. What are you thinking? Are you as
Cam,
up
is this
in
your
arms
first time
just
on
in
the stripe?
general?
Sorry, but cut you off, Toss. Is this your first time on the stripe, Cam?
Yeah, it is. And I look like a mess right now, guys. My lighting is awful. I've been typing away, banging away on the Twitter machine, getting our newsletter ready to go, compiling my thoughts about, honestly, what is a big time day in the world of golf. Guys, golf was invented in the 1600s. Of course, it's been around for quite some time. We've never had a day quite like this, because the PGA Tour has always had a monopoly on this sport. Then LIV comes around, and Jay Monahan shrugs it off, calls it a joke, says that, guys who go over there are not welcome back. They're suspended indefinitely from the PGA Tour. And now we come to the day where Jay counts his dollars and signs off on the merger. And here we are. It's pretty amazing.
Well, welcome to the Stripe. I know Alex was getting into a question. I just wanted to say a formal welcome and maybe a bit of an apology that it took this long and this level of breaking news to get you on the show. But welcome, Cam Rogers. Lock it in. He also hosts our betting show on Stadium. Believe me, Cam. I know you may not be feeling 100%, but you've been a warrior to come on the show, and you look solid, dude. You got one earpiece in, feels very professional, feels very intense, and we like the look. Do you watch Succession, Cam?
You know what? I haven't jumped on board yet.
Okay,
not yet.
We won't go down that route, but it's very Succession-esque, and we'll leave it at that. But it was either take the money and run now, or it seems it gets worse and more. There was no coming back from this. It was only going to get worse for the PGA Tour.
Yeah, and also let's work from the perspective, and I hate to be Johnny Raincloud here, but all humans are greedy creatures in their own right. And Jay Monahan, again, sold out. I mean, we're talking about a guy who a year ago was talking to Jim Nantz on CBS, railing on the LIV Tour as immoral, not right. This is not where we want the game to go, what have you. How do you pull that 180 today and make that deal with LIV? Money. So that's the takeaway in all of this. The other thing, too, is, guys, you have the people like Rory McIlroy and John Rahm and Justin Thomas, who have been the torch holders of the PGA Tour, the loyalists, if you will. And they are finding out this news, according to sources, via Twitter, via texts among their friends. And Jay Monahan, by the way, worked on this by himself, is my understanding, with the Saudi-backed LIV Golf Tour. No conversations with anybody in his camp. Obviously, no conversations with PGA Tour players. This was done kind of in back channels. And now if you're a PGA Tour player, especially one like toward the back of the pack who's barely holding on to your tour card, you're pissed because you could have cashed out with LIV and then, by the way, come back to the PGA Tour. So it's like the big winners are the LIV golfers. They're rich. They can go back to the PGA Tour. And if you're Brooks, you're a major champion too, being a LIV golfer and a suspended member of the PGA Tour. So mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, though? Brooks needed it. His life seemed pretty tough.
Totally.
Honestly. Yeah.
Felt bad for the guy.
I really felt for him. So he obviously needed this. I will say, though, that it is unfortunate. Like we did say this at the top for guys like Rahm, Rory, guys that stuck with the PGA and played some of their best golf and shouldered a lot of the load to kind of lose out on a lot of this money when they could have just done that and come back all along. But, in the lunch pail aspect of sports, you respect him a little more.
Well, this is what I said.
I think it depends on the person, right? Whether or not you respect him a little bit more. Guys like Rahm and Rory.
I found it hilarious when so many people were like finger wagging when players left for the LIV Tour. And it's like, listen, guys, imagine you're Phil. You have yet to hit a tee shot. You already earned $200 million. $200 million. And so for a golfer who, and by the way, guys, on the PGA Tour, this isn't like the NFL or the MLB 6-year contract. You're good for 6 years. The PGA Tour, you are fighting for your tour card every single year. Unless you're, of course, Justin Thomas, Victor Hovland, you win every year. But for the guys toward the back, it's a grind. And you're paying out of your own pocket for hotels and food and car services and what have you. You get some, add-ons there, but they are independent contractors. So for guys toward, again, the end of that 125 ranking on the PGA Tour who found LIV to be attractive, how can you blame them? You set up your family for life. You can still play golf with some of the best, potentially still play in the majors. And oh, by the way, you're back on the PGA Tour now. So
yeah, I
it's
mean,
just
like it's
crazy.
you go for a. I mean, if one of these Saudi dudes offered me $100 million to put on like a leash and get in a gimp suit for a year, see you guys next June. Like I'll be back. Like it's
Right.
I mean, I'd
Do you,
probably have to do a little therapy, but you know, I think that for me, it's a no brainer.
do you think we're getting some comments in the chat about our 3 backwards hats, and I just want to point out that not only are we all wearing backwards hats, we're also all wearing them in a different way. You can wear it straight up to where the hairline is. You can show a little bit of space and then the hair, or you can go with the cam right on top of the hair. No big deal. Let it just curl out of there.
I like the lettuce to come out.
Yeah. Toss, what is yours? We have some guesses in the chat from Edub. Fish is an
right.
he's right for you.
Yeah, I'm not wearing it forwards. That's for sure.
Fish is an excellent guess. On our last few shows, I've done chili peppers. I've done the dead, and I've done fish. You got a Nike one? Hold up,
Always
guys.
Nike.
Always Nike. The Phillies hat. All right.
Super random. I just ripped it off the wall.
Very, very random.
I just took it off the wall and went to get a coffee.
Mine is a Masters hat, but in solidarity, I'm not wearing it forwards because here's my thing. If you're gonna make the decision to stick with the PGA for political reasons, you gotta stick to your guns, and you have to stand firm. Cam, do you expect that there will be anyone that walks away from golf because of this merger?
So here is something that kind of came to mind to me, because I feel like we haven't gotten all of the details yet.
Right.
What's the schedule
we've gotten very
look like?
limited details.
Very limited. By the way, if you look at the press release, the PGA Tour calls LIV groundbreaking. Guys, I mean, is there any sincerity anymore in the human race? Like, can we trust anybody with whatever they say? My God.
No, dude. I mean, if we're getting political on the show, I mean, there was like I call it, you know, stat correct me here, but I'm pretty sure there was a time in the 90s when Mitt Romney was pro-choice and like borderline, like, I think a Democrat, and then, you know, up to become the president of the United States, pro-life, and I'm a Republican now. Like that's nothing. My point. There's nothing.
Does anybody say what they mean anymore? So yeah, Alex, to your point, I actually think that for the PGA Tour players who stayed, they may get a big fat bonus out of this deal. Right. And that would rectify some
of
the
things.
Though?
From who?
Well, it'd be from the PIF, the investment fund, the Saudi-backed investment fund.
That's ironic.
But it could be part of the deal. Right.
No, right.
So okay, so you're
I just think it's ironic that if they get the bonus from the PGA, but the money is being funded through the PIF, and their main problem was where the money was coming from with the PIF. Yeah.
I mean, that's where the money's going to come from anyway. So you are anticipating some sort of restitution.
In some way, I feel like they have to make up for it. I mean, the PGA Tour has to reward them in some way, and I think the PIF is going to have to be involved a little bit here. Right? I mean, think about
it. Well, given how little he communicated with everyone so that they couldn't get involved in the negotiations, it feels a little bit like he's just going to say, mea culpa. But guess what? People are going to watch you play, and this is where everyone is going to be together now, and it's all, you know, campfire songs and strumming on the guitar going forward.
All right, let me say this then. They should make up for this. They should.
I agree.
Okay.
If they don't, Rory, JT, Rahm, they don't need golf anymore, guys. They can go sip on martinis with their friends, hang out with their kids, their family, play golf for fun, and just say, I'm done with you. So, Alex, I guess, yes, they could just walk away because they can. You know?
Yeah, but like, go to the Jack Nicholson in The Departed. Jack Nicholson doesn't need to move dope, but he likes to. It's fun. Like, these guys golf because they like to. And you know what? You're wearing a Nike hat, but a hat you wear all the time is the nice guy hat. And I want you to take the nice guy hat off for 2 seconds, Mr. Rogers, because look at who we're dealing with, right? Like, these guys are, just because they should pay these guys back doesn't mean they're going to. He can take that money and he could just head on over to the Wynn Casino and throw it on black for all he cares, Mr. J. Like, it does not matter. So, I mean, yes, these guys should get paid in some capacity, but we don't know if it's going to happen necessarily.
We don't. We don't know
Cam,
a lot right now.
Have you ever? What are your celeb lookalikes that you get? I need to hear a couple of them because I've got one that I've been thinking about for almost a week now, and I'm gonna bring it to light on air here. But it might already be something that someone said.
I hope it's NPH. I love NPH. I love that comparison. Handsome guy.
No.
If you were blonde,
Um,
I think that one.
If you were blonde, maybe. He kind of looks like the guy. You guys don't watch Ted Lasso. He looks like one of the guys from Ted Lasso a little bit. I just came in watching the show. I'm trying to think though. What do you think? You toss me. That get my wheels turning.
No, I want to hear.
JT?
As in Justin Timberlake.
So one time I arrived at a resort in Florida, and right after I got out of the car, the valet guy was like, "Whoa, I didn't realize JT was staying here this weekend." I had my shades on, but I was like, "Wow, this guy's looking for a tip, huh?"
Yeah, and they would, once you were checking in, they'd be like, "Oh, like, thank you for tipping our blind valet driver."
Yeah.
No,
Thanks,
I
man.
was gonna say I recently finished watching this show called.
This is like a out of left field one.
No, it's not. And I'm the name of the show is escaping me, which is embarrassing. But it was a reality TV show. Oh, it's called Claim to Fame, where basically it's like second degree separation to a famous celebrity all get in a house together, and there's like 12 people, and they're competing by guessing each other's claim to fame. So whichever, like if Josh was related to, the lead singer of Fish or something like that, or as he likes to trick people all the time. Josh, what's the one that you go with?
Dude, it's not
that your uncle is.
My uncle is Steve Harwell, lead singer of Smash Mouth.
Yeah, that second.
I know that bit.
Right.
You made a post about
exactly,
it once, Josh.
Exactly. You know that bit. So if it were true, Josh would go in there and he would try and hide the fact that Steve Hartwell is who he's related to. And whoever ends up not getting guessed by the end is the winner. And it was hosted by Kevin and Frankie Jonas. I think you look a little bit like Kevin Jonas, buddy. Have you gotten that one before?
Wow, I have not. Let me look him up just to get another look at him.
Little Joe Bro situation there.
Okay, Cam could be a Jonas.
Interesting, huh?
Cam is like
not like spitting image, but if you guys were walking next to each other on the street and your coloring's a little bit different, he's got darker hair, but I think facial features are actually somewhat similar.
They would call him Cowbell Cam because, like,
year 3000, baby.
That
enough for you.
That SNL skit when Will Ferrell is like obviously with the cowbell, like that would be Cam would be the cowbell guy in the Jonas Brothers band. Like they'd all be like they'd have all their jobs, and Cam would be like the cowbell fourth brother in the mix.
You're relegating him to the cowbell. There is a fourth brother. His name's Frankie. That's the other co-host.
That's the other co-host. That's poor Frankie. Like,
one of the jokes during the show was Kevin was like, "That's why you're not in the band," because he like said something that wasn't funny, and he was like, "That's why you're not in the band." That's why.
Do you play an instrument, Cam? No, right?
No, I played the piano back in the day, but that was it.
Yeah,
hated it.
Cam, well, I'm gonna run a couple of I had some interesting influencer marketing ideas now that LIV and PGA are merging. You guys let me know what you think about these, and please bring some to the table because I think that the possibilities here are endless. Lot of LIV puns flying around on Twitter and golf Twitter.
Live, laugh, love.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a cute one. Got to get that sign mocked up for your mom, Cam. Livy Dunn doing a floor routine over the new logo. What do we think about that?
Okay.
Bringing in the new crowd, the influencers, the TikTok users.
Yeah. I'm trying to
Livy
think.
Dunn. She's well liked. Bon Jovi, Josh, you like this one, plays Living on a
I was
Prayer
about to say
first event, obviously.
Yeah.
And then Cam, this one, you won't necessarily get this one because you haven't seen Succession. So I guess the takeaway from this is go watch. But Josh, Matthew McFadden and Jay Monahan having a slap contest between the two of each other to see who gets the pain sponge champ is what we would then crown the winner of that.
That's amazing.
That is a really like big, the slap contests, like the slap championships. Those are like a big thing now. Have you guys seen that?
Well, it's Dana White.
Right. It's Dana White. Cam, have you seen that?
No.
Basically just grown men slapping each other as hard as
But
they can.
with mouth, it's not like, oh, like we're out in the park doing it. It's like real live events, and these guys are just you hold on, you brace yourself, you have a mouth guard in, and if you get knocked out, like you get knocked out.
And it's a you go, I go kind of situation.
Sounds painful, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you and your nice jawline would be.
Can't have this ruined. This is the moneymaker. We
that
all
is,
know it.
you have a strong jawline, Cam. That thing would get sent to Pluto.
Can't have it.
I mean, I think it's, those guys are doing it obviously because if they win, there's some monetary prize attached to it. And
Sure.
backed by the Saudis.
Back to the point. No,
Yeah.
back to the point with LIV is
Public
you don't even
investment fund.
Phil didn't even have to swing club. He already had the money. You mentioned the Dark Knight earlier, Josh. It's like these guys were just presented a pyramid of bills, and they're they're willing to get it from the Joker, I guess, is kind of where we're at.
That's the Joker in this situation being the Saudis.
I wish we could play a soundbite live right now because I would love for your audience to hear what Jay Monahan said just a year ago with Jim Nantz. And he even went down the path of talking about the 9/11 families and how, they are just not about LIV golf whatsoever. Totally understandable. And Jay said to Jim, I have people very close to me who lost people in 9/11. What is he going to say to those people now that
two families, he said. I remember because I watched, I think this morning at some point, whether it was you sharing it or someone else, Cam, that clip. Two families, he says, that are close to him.
Yep.
It's
going to be an awkward conversation.
Oh, man.
100%.
Like, I think I could share my screen. Hold up. Let me see. Hold up. I'm going for it.
Okay.
Share screen. Okay.
It's just incredible.
God. Hold up. Yeah, I found a really fitting tweet. The first thing I found was pretty fitting, I would say. Okay.
I can't imagine the amount of group chats blowing up amongst tour players and LIV golfers.
Can you guys see my screen?
Oh yeah, we got you.
Oh, let's go. Who's a streamer? Let's go, baby. Jay Monahan talking about 9/11 victim families at his next press conference.
Is in honor of George Floyd. And I really hope we can see more unity and more peace when already things are so difficult. So, shout out to his family.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream.
Wow.
Yep. Have you seen that video before, Cam?
No, I haven't.
Brutal, right? It's a real video.
That is tough to watch in any context.
That is how backwards of David Guetta is that? It's the first thing I found when I looked that up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I typed in Jay Monahan 9/11 and victims, and that was like the first thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a complete sellout. I not to even take 9/11 lightly. It's like it's actually one of the few things I don't. I mean, I like to joke about a lot of things. It's one of the few things I don't find funny. That was a stance that he had taken in the past of like, it is a complete sellout move on his part. And I honestly don't necessarily respect it.
Not even like saying it privately with family, friends, national TV during a golf broadcast 365 days ago. Like, dude.
Just imagine being the PR team.
Oh,
in that room when he's like, okay, here's what we're doing. Like, here's this backdoor deal that I've basically facilitated without the knowledge of any of the players that make up our sport, that make up our tour. And you have to be in that meeting and you have to say, oh, yep. Yeah. That's a great idea, Jay. And then someone is like, well, but remember that video remember with Nance, you remember? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. It won't matter. Not important.
Well, actually,
I'll be
kind of,
rich.
I mean, I don't know if it'll, matter for him. I don't know if he'll pay the price, but we've seen people like, I think Brian Williams.
Well,
what
public
was it?
image wise, yes, he's already paying the price. I mean, us talking about it, the flack that he's catching, but I just, like Cam said, he's saving his own skin financially here. Right?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. But it's like the
that's
tough,
and that's what it comes down to.
using 9/11 as some sort of shield, I'll say, or some sort of like, landing, like just like, backing for a point. Like, it's the biggest tragedy since Vietnam in our country. I'll throw that out. I'll say, and probably the biggest tragedy on American soil since the 1900s, like 1800s, right?
Pearl Harbor, really.
Pearl Harbor, yeah. Yeah, sorry, Pearl Harbor. I'm sorry to forget about Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor, and then obviously Civil War. Like, that's what you could throw 9/11. I mean, it changed the landscape of national security, airport security, like all of it forever. Changed the way we like live our lives. And to use that so publicly and so freely, and then to be devoid of the actual meaning of that and what your statement means when you say those things and make a deal and a move, he may never pay the price. It may get swept under the rug. It may never become public like we're discussing right now. It may just be a blip in the radar. But like a video like we just played, like, yeah, it's a little silly and funny, but like that in some part is like how blind he is to what he just, to the point he was trying to make and to the example he used. Like, it's not something you can just throw out in a statement and take lightly. It's not some because I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I've been in classrooms growing up where you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance on 9/11. And there's kids in my class whose parents died. Like, you're in the room with, like, I'm from New York. There's kids' parents who
Right.
are, unfortunately passed away in 9/11. My grandfather, it led to my grandfather's death. There was like a class action lawsuit, they're a part of, like, where my grandfather and thousands of others developed lung cancer because they worked so close to the World Trade Center. It's like, and even if you didn't die that day, it still paid dividends across the board. Like, so to me, to use that so lightly and then to use that as one of your reasonings for not supporting LIV and then go and support LIV a year later is
Right.
it's a very loose usage of a very serious topic to me.
I think that I don't necessarily know how loose the usage was at the time.
I'm sure he
Right?
meant
Like,
it. I'm sure he meant it.
No, I think that there were there were tons of concerns, not only with PGA, but also with the individual players. And that's why I asked Cam the question about guys potentially stepping away, because there are certain guys on the tour that have the same level of revere and seriousness to the lives that were lost and how important that event and that tragedy, 9/11 was in American history, and it took so many people's lives. And so that's why I asked that question, Cam, is because it's more than the sport for some of these people. And it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out for sure. But yeah, I guarantee that there was a neglected person who raised their hand and said, hey, by the way, this needs to be addressed, or this is not a good idea for X, Y, and Z reason, and pointed to that video. And at the end of the day, they still went through with it because of the financial implications and reasons.
One thing I know is Jay Monahan is going to have to face the music at some point. He had a cushy interview with CNBC this morning and broke the news there. That was the exclusive, so softballs only. But eventually he's going to have to face the media at the next PGA Tour press conference. Evidently, he's there in Canada, or going up there to Canada today for the RBC Canadian Open on the PGA Tour this week. Got to meet with players. That's going to get prickly, I know for a fact. And maybe he'll speak to the media then today, tomorrow, we shall see. But eventually he will. He's going to get a lot of tough questions, and he better be ready for them, honestly.
Yeah. Rob Manfred's never looked better.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, if that's the kind of comp we're taking, like this, which maybe gives you some hope. And I know we're harping on the 9/11, aspect of things, which again, like, can't condemn it enough. But if Rob Manfred could bounce back from a disaster that was his handling of the 2020 season, the COVID season, I think, the PGA could bounce back from their condemning of LIV and make positive of the merger.
The news cycle moves on, right, guys?
Yeah.
I think eventually people are gonna, because that's what they did with Phil and kind of did with LIV in general, and things will move on, but we'll see.
Yeah, we shall see. We shall see. Mr. Rogers, thanks for joining us. T-Dot, always a pleasure. We're the Daily Stripe. Cam Rogers, lock it in. And believe me, on Stadium, hit your free throws because they're free. Don't miss that putt.